Now, one of the big things that we see out there, again, keep going back to the establishment media because they get a lot of things wrong. But the thing that we see them freaking out about is the president and talking about tariffs, right? Like tariffs are obviously a big tool here that you guys are using to achieve the economic goals that you're talking about. Can you explain for us the usefulness of tariffs, why the president is focused on doing this, and what the goals are and the aims are? Because again, the critics out there will say, oh, he's just haphazardly doing stuff or retaliating against people or because he's upset about something. I disagree. I think there's a method to this madness, and I think that he has a plan here. So explain it for us.
Well, you could call it a madness. I'll call it a plan.
Right.
With President Trump, it's never in a straight line. But look, he harassed and harangued our European allies, and everyone said, "Oh, you can't be. These are our friends. You can't be mean to them." But it's kind of like tough love with a family member. When you tell a relative, like, I'm not supporting you anymore, they get off the sofa and get a job. But he cajoled and harassed the Europeans. And for the first time in 25 years, the Germans are breaking open the piggy bank. They're taking off the debt brake, and they're going to do their fair share of military spending. 5 presidents could not get them to do it, and President Trump has done it. So it's the same thing here. And with tariffs, that the American workers, it started with this China shock in 2004. Working Americans have not seen the real wage increases. They've seen good paying manufacturing jobs disappear. They've seen their communities get hit. And I took some flack last week at the Economic Club where I said cheap goods are not the American dream. Well, Mike Pence came out and said Secretary Bessent doesn't know what he's talking about. And I would tell former vice president that let them eat flat screens is not an economic policy. People want to have good jobs. They want to own a home. They want to have dignity. They want to enjoy their work. They want their communities to be sound. And we want affordability, but bringing in a bunch of baubles and trinkets to satisfy people who are displaced isn't the American dream.
We're seeing a number of major companies either come to the United States or come back to the United States. And, just today, GE Aerospace announced a $1 billion investment in the United States. We're seeing a Japanese beer maker, Asahi, is investing in U.S. manufacturing. We're seeing Honda talk about building factories here in the United States and manufacturing automobiles here. It seems like your guys' vision is working, right?
Look, this is a slow and inexorable process, and there will be no tariffs for the companies who move their manufacturing here, and that's part of it. There's a necessary rebalancing that's going on. China is the most imbalanced or unbalanced economy in the history of the world. They've exported deflation. Their manufacturing policies have decimated our workers, decimated our communities, and by putting up a tariff wall, the manufacturers will bring the production back here, or we can collect a substantial amount of revenue for the U.S. government. The initial phase 1 tariffs from Trump 1.0, I think are collecting $30–40 billion a year, which can go to pay for a lot of tax cuts for working Americans.
Mm-hmm. So the president talked about this in his joint address to Congress last week. He said the goal here is reciprocal tariffs, right? And he talked about this again on Truth Social this morning. He was talking about how we don't have free trade. There is no such thing, right? Because these other countries are ripping us off. They're tariffing us, and we're not tariffing them back. Can you explain the reciprocal tariff vision here? And then I want to get into some of the estimates on revenue. But
let's go back. The president wants fair trade,
mm-hmm.
and I want to go back to your previous question too about manufacturing. Coming back to the U.S. because we do it through tariffs, but for it to be truly successful, we've got to create the economic environment through permanence in our tax policy. So the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will give the manufacturers certainty. We want to deregulate, so we want to decrease the regulatory burden, and we want cheap energy. So deregulation, cheap energy, the low taxes should really set the table for a manufacturing renaissance. And it's a multi-year process, but we're just seeing the beginning of it.
The president's talked about that he wants an external revenue service, right? Obviously, I believe it was this room where the internal revenue service started, but the external revenue service is something President Trump has started. Can you kind of give us an estimate? I know it's early in the process, but is there any idea of, just in terms of how much revenue is being collected by these tariffs that President Trump is putting in place?
Back to your question, reciprocal tariffs, because we actually don't know, because the reciprocal tariffs could go either way. So that consists of, we will say to the Europeans, you have a 10% tariff on American cars coming into Europe. We have a 2.5% tariff on European cars coming in the US. We're either coming up to 10%, and then we would collect substantial revenues, or you can come down to 2.5, or we could both go to 0. So you let us know what you want to do, but it's path dependent. So there is a chance that we, on an annual basis, could be collecting several $100 million a year in tariffs, or the trade friction could drop, that we have free trade becomes fair again, and we'll see which way it goes. But I think in a way it's win-win, that either we collect a substantial amount of revenue, or we get access to these foreign markets who have really not played fairly.
So tariffs are kind of like, if you're looking at this like a carrot and stick type of idea of trying to get companies to come back to the United States or come to the United States and operate here. They're the stick, right? But you've got several carrots as well. I think you talked about several of these in your speech to the New York Economic Club. Can you talk to us a little bit about the carrots, if you will?
It's like I said earlier, it's the deregulation, it's cheap energy, and it's going to be an abundant workforce as we move from workers, move from the government sector to the private sector. And one of the reasons during the past 4 years that we had negative or stagnant real wage growth was that so many of the jobs created were government jobs, and the government does not create real wage growth. Only the private sector creates real wage growth.
So I think one of the things you talked about too was being able to, for these companies to be able to write off their depreciation. Can you talk to us about that for new facilities?
Sure. So two things. In the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, we saw that one of the most powerful things to stimulate the economy was 100% depreciation of equipment in a factory, in an office, for a company's fleet. What we are considering now is allowing companies to, in the first year, write off 100% of their factory. We may do that in a 4-year window to encourage the manufacturing to come back faster.
Are you getting more and more interest from companies? Are you hearing from business leaders, et cetera, that they want to do this or looking for ways to build new facilities in America, invest in America with President Trump back in the White House? What's the scuttlebutt out there in the business world?
Yeah, look, everybody is very constructive, and it's a combination because at Treasury I meet with both companies, sovereign wealth funds, foreign investors, and everyone's told me the foreign investors want to increase their allocation to the U.S., and then the companies all think that this is a very dynamic business environment and great opportunity.